Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Chulin daf Ches. We are going to begin at the very top of Ches Amud Aleph. So now we're going to start getting into the meat and potatoes about this concept of shchita. So the Gemara says, Amr Zera Mishmuel, Liban Sakin. Let's say you have a knife, but it's not just a regular knife. You actually put it up into fire, so it's already a heated up blade. B'shachat ba. Shchita sukshera. So if you do the shchita, it's fine. The knife has no pigimos, there's nothing wrong with it, except that it's very hot. Now, why would it be a problem? We'll see in a second, but we say that that the sharp part of the knife is going to cut very quickly before it ends up burning anything. Obviously, you cannot kill an animal with fire. That's not going to be a kosher animal to consume. You have to do shchita. Now the problem is that if it's a very, very hot blade, so maybe that's what's causing the animal to be killed, not the shchita. So we said, no, don't worry about it. Because after all, the sharp point of the knife is what causes it to be killed, and that happens before the burning. How about the hot sides that are touching? Maybe that will become problematic. Then it could even make some type of a hole in the veshet, and even the smallest amount, it become treifa. So on this, we say no. Beis hashchita mirvach ravach. What happens is that as you do the shchita, it causes everything to expand, and as you cut it and it continues to expand, it's not really touching the studim, so you don't have to worry about it. It says Rashi, misrachiv hachatach mitztehet sakin mikan mikan ve'eno geh hasimin. It doesn't really touch the simonim el chiduda shel sakin. The only thing that is touching it is the sharpness of the knife. So iboyelu, the Gemara asks the following question. So ibun, so that was by a knife. Let's say libun shvud, that you heated up a spit. V'hacha behika boy, and you hit a person with great strength. This individual. So the question is. And then afterwards, he ends up getting saras on that part of the body. So mishum shchin nidain, or mishum michva nidain. Do we view the actual shchin? And Rashi says in the goyim, as we're going to see in a second, that this boil comes through heat and through strength, and also this burn the same way. So what's the difference if it's a shchin, a boil? What's the real nafkim between that and a burn? So my nafkimin, look at the sanya shchin umichve. Let's say you have two different types of saras. One is like a boil, and the other one is like a burn. So metamin b'shvua echad. We say it's all metama in 1 week. So what is this referring to? Says Rashi. That l'may nafkimin be'eza davar cholok din maike mishchin de boilach b'shnei simonim. There's two ways. So again, matamin b'shvua echad. It's matama 1 week. B'shnei simonim. There's two ways it becomes tamei. B'ser lavan, with a white hair, uve fasyain, and also if the saras gets larger. So why is it? Do we mention it? If it's saras either way, hakosov is loimer she'en mitzdarfen zemzeh, that they're not mitzdarf. It has to be a certain shiur, and if it's not enough, then they're not mitzdarf. Says Rashi, she'en behen hisker sheni. You don't get secluded twice, but once. She'im aman be'enov. If let's say it gets better. When it comes to these two things, lo nemar ela hesker echad. There's only one form of seclusion. If he gets up better after the first week, we say that if it was cleared up, then that's perfectly fine. So again, what is this? Nafgamina. So let's say you have it becomes tamei when you see a white hair, and also with if you end up seeing that the saras is getting bigger. So Rashi, impasa v'lo cannot take shesimin tumaso b'ser sahoy. So v'lo macholka kasa v'lo mershem and starvim zem and zeh, says Rashi, l'shir nega kigris. It has to be the size of a gris, like a bean, and if, let's say, half of it is because of heat, machmash chum hamaka, shloi the or, but not through the fire. V'chatzi gris etzel alidei kvias or aim starfen. So if there's two different reasons, so then it's not going to be an issue. So shchin is a lashon chamimois. It's the language of heat. Now V'tanya, we're going to talk about, why are we talking about saras over here? We're talking about shchita. Ezo shchin ve'ezo mechve. What is this inflammation and what is this burn? Like, what's the difference? So laka be'etz, if a person was hit with wood, be'evan, be'gefes, be'chami tveria, with the hot waters of Tveria, b'chol davar shlo ba machmas, or anything which is not literally fire related, l'isui aver mi'ikaro, like lead, zehu shchin. That's considered to be a heat source market. That's considered to be like through inflammation. Vezu michve. So what is considered a burn? Nichma begachelas, if you get burned with a coal, beremetz, betzid, retzech, with this hot pitch or lime, begafsis retzech, whole davar haba machmas or. Anything which comes from fire, if it comes the heat of an actual fire, that's considered to be burn. And zuhi michva, that's a burning nega. Vatanya. So you have these two different things. You have the inflammation, which is the shchin, and then you have michve, which is a burn. So we decided which one is, again, they're not starf. Each one has to be a gris onto itself. Now, Vatanya, shchin u'michve. Let's say you have both of these things in the same place. So which one is it? So im shchin koydem u'michve. If the inflammation came before the burn, so batal michve. So the es shchin, the michve will mevatel the shchin. The michve koydem es shchin. On the other hand, if the burn came first, so batal shchin is a michve. So basically, we go after the last thing that happened, right? And therefore, the first thing is considered like it didn't happen. Says Rashi, but nafkiminu in siruf, combining. Shim hoisul chatzi gris shchin. If let's say it was only a half a gris, the laka ba'or ba'oisu chatzi gris, and it was, you were hit by fire, and as we said, that constitutes as michva. Nefach oisu gris v'nase michva, right? So v'hashta hanile bittul. She'ilu lo bittul chatzi gris harishon haya zemet starf imoy. So again, if it's bottle, the question is, then is it mitzdarf? It can't be mitzdarf, etc. With its own, because it's bottle, it's not there. Over here, what's the din? So he had a half measure of shchin, of this inflammation, v'libin shvud, and then someone took a spit and burned him. And he hit him. There's another chatzi gris. So the question is that mitzdarf, those two chatzi gris? So the hit is hot, as a stick is burning, but the force of the impact also happened, which caused inflammation. So v'liben shvud v'hikabo nafik v'chatzi gris acher mai chavata kadam is the hit first v'asi chavala, and then afterwards you had the burn umavata lechavata, and since the burn took place first, so it took away from the blow. V'havli shchin umichve. Therefore, it's now considered like shchin umichve v'lo mistarfin. They're not combining. Dilma haval kadam. Maybe the burn was first. And now comes the chavata, and it's going to be mavatal the havala, it's going to be mavatal the burn. So therefore it could be mitzdarf, the two together. So Tashma. Again, what are we talking? We're talking about shchita. So here's the reason, because it's a raya from our Mishnah. from this Gemara rather. Liban sakin, if you heat up a knife, a shachad bashchitas ksher, it's fine. Why? Chiduda kodim levuna. We say the sharpness of the knife comes before the actual burn. So alma chavat kodim. So we see that the impact comes before the burn. We see clearly, just like the knife, the cutting comes before the burn. So too over here comes before the burn. So the answer is you can't compare. The chodod shani, a knife's blade has less heat on its edge, and therefore because of that, it's going to be a kosher shechita. The question was if he was hit by the blunt part of a spit, which has more material there, right? So and therefore that could be more problematic. So because it's a very small amount, it's not going to really cause heating as fast. And the knife itself, the cutting is what's going to go first, as opposed to a spit, which is wider. So look in Rashi, to be toich shehu chad, because a knife is very sharp, ein hevel ha'or, and also narrow, ein hevel ha'or shebo chazak, v'chitasoi kadum havoloi. So it's going to be cutting before it causes any heat. Okay. So Gemara tries elsewhere. Tashma liban shvud. If you heat up a spit, v'hikabo, and you hit someone with it, nidan mishum michvas eish. Alma, what do we see? Chavat kadam. We see that the wound comes first. It says hasam nami debarze mivras dahainu chadud. That you poked him, which is the same thing as chadud, as like our case of the knife. It says Rashi, Shuli kilu b'koyach. He didn't hit him like this way, and therefore when you hit him this way, you're hurting him, but also with the impact, you're causing a burn. That's not what happened over here. Instead, you poked him with the sharp point of the spit. Elo dikaru ve'in kan chavata elo hevel. Avo hikaru deika chavata ika dechahavi basra. So basically, you don't have an answer to this question, because again, if we're talking not that you're hitting him this way, but rather with the poking him, so then that's the same thing as the sharpness, which of course is going to come before the heat. However, if you hit him in this way, it's not so clear. Let's say you have a knife that belongs to idol worshippers. So we say like this: you can actually use this guy's knife. However, you can't cut meat with it. Now, if you're allowed to use it, the question is, why would you be allowed to use it? So the Gemara actually is shtickle madna, because Rashi points out that this knife is aser bahana, because you're not allowed, as the Masechtas Avodah Zarah says, avi ta'abdon es kol mekaimos, that you have to basically destroy and not use any form of anything that was used for Avodah Zarah. But for some reason, you can shecht with it. So how does that make sense? So Gemara's going to explain. So first of all, muter lishchot ba makalkahu, because you're not really getting any hana, says Rashi. Enzu hana. De b'chayehu hayu dameha merubin mela'achar shchita she b'chayahi oimedes l'gimel devarim l'gadol v'ladais l'charisha l'achila. What's more valuable, a piece of meat or a living animal? A piece of meat, all it's good for is food, which is, of course, could be expensive, but you can't compare it to a living animal in which it could be giving birth, right? You can use it for offspring, you can use it to plow your fields, and it's true, you can eventually use it for food. So a living animal is more valuable than a shechted animal. So therefore, you're not, of course, the knife has to be kosher, right? You have to make sure that there's no nicks or anything like that. But the question is, how can you use this knife? The answer is, it's really, you're not getting hana, because you've actually caused the value of the animal that you have to go down. But you're not allowed to use it to cut the meat, because that makes it nice. Obviously, people don't want this big slab of meat, and therefore you're masaking it, and that's not allowed. So it's possible the other way around, that when you shecht, maybe you're not allowed to, if the animal is already dying, so it can't do work, it's not going to give birth, and it's dying, it's going to lose value every moment that it's around. So you want to shecht it, and therefore your masaka in that case won't be allowed. Umechatech mutter, and the other way, sometimes you can cut the meat and it's not really adding value to it. It's ba'atmi dekaimin l'kurbana. So as Rashi says, that if you have like a very high quality meat, and it's better that it should just be in one piece. And if you start cutting it up, then it actually loses value. Then it becomes kilkel. V'tepukle mishum shimnunis di isura. So why don't we say that even though it's mekalkel by using this knife, maybe you still shouldn't be able to use it because of the fattiness that there's an isser in the velus that are absorbed into the knife. So right now the knife is kosher, okay? But the problem is once you use this, it's possible that the isser nevelos is going to be absorbed into the knife. So as we continue, so that's the question. So as we continue the Chesed Beis, not really, because b'chadasha, we're talking that it's new. It says Rashi, shelo chatchu ba me'oyom, was never cut before, so it's a brand new knife. So Chadasha ben Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Kiva misham shavas chachamim hein. What's the difference? It's still used for avodah zarah. Misham shavas chachamim hein and asurin ad sheyavdu. The reality is that it was never used. We don't say like hazmana milsa. The reality is that you have to actually use it. So what is this machlokas? The Gemara in avodah zarah says that when it comes to avodah zarah itself, hikaman diyamer asur miyad, it's also right away. Hikaman diyamer likishavad kuloi kishavad, when you actually use it. However, everyone admits, like by kalim, shenim asurim ad shiyabdu, has to be until you actually use them. So until they're used, what's the problem? If it's new, you can use it. So Iboy Seima did pasik be gabza, that you actually did use it, not for meat, but he did it to chop wood, for idol worship, and therefore it does take upon itself use of avodah zarah, but it's not an issue of for having been used for meat. The Iboy Seima b'yashana could be an older knife, shalivna ba'or, that it was in contact with fire. And therefore, since it was in contact with fire, so therefore it's not something which we have to worry about. It says Rashi, going shlimna ba'or ve'ein kan iser shimnunis, because all of the fattiness that was in that knife has already been removed. Okay, it's been poiled. Question 7. Sakan shel tachavim ha'im mutar lishchait ba o lachtach ba basar. So typically, yes, you could shecht, with the exception, because it's kilkel, unless it's an animal which is misukenes. On the other hand, you are not allowed to cut meat because it's misakin, unless we're talking about a very high quality meat that you're going to give as a gift, and if it's all cut up into pieces, it's not as, the quality is not as good. Okay, so that is the answer to that. Okay, let's keep on moving. So the Gemara continues with the following piece. Itmar. So again, unless you use an idol worshipper's knife, so Rav Oimer Koilif. It's not, you can just do the shechita. Okay, maybe it's kosher, but you have to do kalipa. You need to remove the part and peel off the part, so to speak, of what came in contact with the knife, and that's not allowed to be used. All you need to do is rinse off that area, and that's sufficient. So, and that would be enough. Just rinse off the simonim. So, maybe this is the machlokas. The marsavar beis hashchita tzainin. The beis hashchita is cold, so all you have to do is wash it off. Umarsavar beis hashchita retzech. It's hot, and therefore you have to do klipa. Lo the kuliyama beis hashchita retzech. It's really hot. So mandi yemer koyel shaper. The fact that you have to peel it off makes sense. It's hot. Mandi yemer madiach. So why is rinsing it enough? It's hot. The answer is I did the teridim simonim lafukidam luboli, that it cannot be absorbing and also taking out at the same time. Even though we say the din's kaboiloi kachpoiltai, however, in this situation, when it's being absorbed, it cannot. When it goes in, it cannot go out at the same time. But when you're doing the shechita, what's happening? The dam's going out, and since there's an action of going out, that nothing will absorb in it either. So therefore, klipa is not necessary. All is necessary is hadacha. Some say it the other way around. It's really cold. So just rinse it off. Why do you have to be so strict? Because agav ducha de sakina bola. So as we know that even when you're dealing with something which is heated, so that's where there's a problem of things absorbing. If it's cold, it's not as problematic. Maybe you just have to rinse it off. However, the exception is with a knife, because the duchka de sakina, the pressing of the knife, that actually produces an element of heat, and therefore we're more strict when it comes to that. Okay, let's slow down for a second. Let's look at question 8. Masvara klipa. What's the svara of hadacha? So question 8. Klipa afal pi shchita tzainin, because agav ducha de sakina. Due to the pressure, of the knife, it will absorb. Or maybe madiach, that even though the beis hashchita is hot, but because since the simanim are extracting blood, it's not going to be boileya at the same time. TA 6. Madua koilev, madua madiach, 2 and 2. So, not sure if I wrote the right answer. It says either you do klipa because the beis hashchita is hot, or because the dos sakina. Madiach, either because the beis hashchita is cold, or because I did the teridi. Okay, I'm not sure if that's what I wrote over here. Shezacham or afield signing ducha de sakina. Okay, I did write that. Excellent. Okay, so let's keep on moving. I think that's going to be it for questions. So let's finish this daf. Sak and treifa. So let's say, we had already a knife of an akum. Do you have to do kedei klipa? Do you have to do hadacha? So what if the knife is a treifa knife? Look at the Rashi for ducha de sakina. Shemishafshafu b'basar b'doichik. Because you're pushing very hard into the meat, when you do the shchita, it's going to be boileya. V'kivan do ifsik hilchasa. Since there's no psak, yisur d'oraisahu avdin and l'chomra. We go strict. The kaimalon b'shel tayra halach achar hamachmir. We have to go strict, and therefore you're going to have to do klipa in this case. Mikol makam achatchil yishchait. You probably will achat chizim in shecht to hashaychet kaimer. We're talking about b'diavad over here. If you did the shchita, so you really shouldn't use an akum's knife, because you're causing yourselves problems. And even though it's mutar b'hana, etc., it's asur b'hana, but you're not really getting hana because it loses value, so it's a mekalkel. Better not to use it. Now, how about a sak and treifa? So let's say a person shechted, sheshachad ba treifa. You shechted a treifa animal, an animal that had internal injuries, that was going to die. So that obviously is going to cause problems to the knife. So pligi ba Rav Achav Ravina chad aimer b'chamen. One says you should kasher the knife in hot water. The chad aimer b'tzayin. The other one says in cold water. So what is hot water? So it says Rashi sarach lahagil sakin. Because it absorbed the fatness of the treifa animal, so therefore you have to do hagala, which of course has to do with having boiling hot water, let's say in a kosher pot, boiling hot water, and then you completely submerge that item, and here this knife, in it. On the other hand, maybe it's signing. All you have to do is something cold, says Rashi. Ksaver beis hashchita signing, because the beis hashchita is very cold. It's not heated up, so you don't need it. So we say you have to kasher in the same way as problematic. But if you hold that it was hot, so therefore you need hagoah. Or maybe you can just use cold water, and that would be sufficient. Even that is acceptable. Now that's strange. We already said before we're machmir when we're not sure. Here we're makel. Says Rashi, "V'gabi sakin shel heterhu the pasuk hilchas lahatera delo itzer bibliazu." It's just we know that it doesn't absorb in that way. Therefore, you don't need to do hagala. You can even sign it. V'ika belisa the parsa michvere lot sarach. If it turns out that you have, says Rashi, chatichas beged yishana, you have these clothes from a curtain or something like that, then all you need to do is wipe it. Lamichvere kapara is wiping it. All you have to do is wipe the blade, and lot sarach, you don't have to do any more. You don't have to wash it. The one who says that you actually have to take the knife that you had a treifa connected to it, then you have to do hagoa, my time, mishum, the kaboli surah, because he's concerned that the fatness absorbed into the knife. So the hatera nami bola ever minachai. Why are we talking about a treifa? Even if it's a kosher animal, maybe it's the same problem that you would need to kasher it as well with hagoa because of ever minachai, right? That in this situation, there's an issue of, says Rashi, ki shachid ba behema ksheru, when you shech the kosher animal, neboy hagoa, you should do hagoa. The haboa shimnunis dever menachai, because while you're shechting it, the fattiness went into the knife, kaidim gemar shchita. So you're doing the shchita, and the second you start doing the shchita, there's fattiness that's going into it, so it's ever menachai, fat in the knife. So you should always have to do hagoa. So the answer is amos balo lachi chaymo. When does it actually absorb the fat? Only once it gets hot. Amos kochaymo lachi gamra shchita. It only happens at the end. Ha'ishaita hatera havi. And at the time, at the end of the shchita, you already cut the simanim. So therefore, because of that, it's already beheter. So it's not considered to be aver menachai. Okay. Omer Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rav. Hatabach sarich shloisha sakinin. So a butcher needs to have 3 knives. He's supposed to own 3 knives. Why 3? Acha sheshachan ba, one for shchita. The acha shemachatech ba basar, one he'll use to chop and cut the meat into pieces. Ve'echad shemachatech ba chalavim, and the other one's to be able to cut off the forbidden fats on the animal. So v'liskin leichada, just have one. V'lachtech ba basar, cut the meat. V'hada lachtech ba chalavim, and then cut the fats. What's the problem? Okay, obviously you need a special knife for shchita, but why do you need 2 other knives? Just use the knife for a heter, for cutting up the meat, and then afterwards remove the fats. Because what if you invert it? So you use the knife already to cut the fats, so now those fats have absorbed into this knife, and now you're going to end up using it for cutting the meat, which will be problematic. So hashtanami michlafle, so just do maybe you'll exchange them. So since you're going to remember, there'll be a simon you'll remember, so you're not going to get confused that you'll use this knife, that knife. No, once we require 3, then they're going to be more strict. Remember Rabbi Yehuda Marav, hatamech sarch shnei kelim shalmayim. So a butcher needs to have 2 vessels of water. Echad shemediach bo basar, one is to rinse the meat. Echad shemediach bo chalavim, and the other one is again for the fats. So v'niskin leichad, and just use one. Then diach bo basar, first use it for the kosher meat. But then diach bo chalavim, then after use it for the fats. Same problem. Maybe you'll end up using it for the fats first, for the non-kosher fats. So maybe you get them all mixed up. Since you need 2 kalim, so he's not going to make that mistake. Lo lischayf inish kafli olayu bisar. A person should not take flanks, like the sides of an animal, right? And I'm trying to read this word. The doiv tarba ubola bisra, that it's going to end up dripping fat onto the meat and it'll absorb. So you can't put it on top of the meat because it'll end up dripping down and it'll end up absorbing the meat underneath and it'll become problematic. So yahachi ki taritzi nami, if it's on a board, should be the same problem. After all, doiv tarva ubola bisra, the fats are going to drip on the board and it's going to end up mixing up with the meat. So karma mafsik metatoi. So he said that there's a membrane that separates it from below. Says Rashi, mafsik bein cholav labasar. There's something that separates the meat and the fats. They're not touching. There's a membrane that separates them. V'hu oisa krum she'onu noitel min haksolim, and it's this membrane that we take from the flanks. and you can see in Rashi it says flanks. V'av, it's thick. V'chazaku is strong. V'kach aser shechol of nivla boy, because it's going to absorb. Of ein nivla kol kach she'ezav. Okay. Lebaser shetachta. It's not going to absorb and flow so much. Okay. So, fine. Ihachi, if that's the case, Testament Aleph. Me'iloi nami karma ika. Maybe we should say the same thing going up. So Adi dime mashmisha yada, since you're busy with the meat, the tavcha mifsas. The membrane will end up crumbling. Says Rashi. Mifsas loshin pitos, also pitim. Like we saw about the mincha, it ends up crumbling before us. Ad kan.